Hello, it's lovely to be here. So my talk today is on facing into climate change as a parent, and I wanted to start by sharing this visual with you because I absolutely love it. This is the scientific and creative genius of Professor Ed Hawkins from the University of Reading, if you don't already know it. And as my 9-year-old daughter would tell you, it depicts the fluctuation in global temperatures from the year 1850 until the present day. It's pretty cool, huh? But I think we can all agree if we look at it that it's getting hotter, a lot hotter. And for me as a parent, when I look at this visual, I find it both stunningly beautiful and deeply, deeply troubling. So I want you to cast your minds back a couple of years to the first summer of lockdown. It was one of the hottest summers on record. And I don't know what you were up to, but I was working from home. I was trying to homeschool my 2 kids who were 3 and 7 at the time. And it was scorching. So I found myself going deeper and deeper into the forest and taking the kids with me to partly escape from their screens, but more just to find some shade and to find that real restorative calm that you get when you're in the forest. I've always loved trees ever since I was a little girl, and this was just something that really struck me at the time. As an innovation designer, I was doing some innovation work with a really amazing social enterprise called United Edge, and they fight for social and environmental justice all around the world. And we were looking at taking their business online because of lockdown, and we were running an online learning experience for about 250 participants from all around the world, largely from Africa and Asia. So one day, I'm in a small breakout room on Zoom with some of the participants, and we're just introducing ourselves. And the first person says, hi, my name's such and such, and I help to prevent child trafficking in Siem Reap in Cambodia. And the second person says, this is me, and I provide emergency crisis relief from hurricanes in the Pacific Islands. And inevitably, the conversation comes around to me, and it's like, hey, Laura, what do you do? And the thought that flashes across my mind is not enough. Over the course of the next 6 weeks of what we were doing, I got to hear frontline stories from climate change all around the world, different outcomes in different places, but it quickly became apparent to me that things that I did in my daily life had a direct impact and was causing a lot of suffering, and I found it deeply shocking. So, a little bit slippy. So I did the only thing I could think of doing. I grabbed every book I could find to read up on the climate science. I watched every documentary I could lay my hands on. I went to Cambridge University to study the climate science at the Institute for Sustainable Leadership. And all of that just really helped me to realise and fill in that gap in my knowledge around, so what are the key causes of the climate science and how best can I get involved in fixing the problem that I'm clearly a big part of? And at that time, a really good friend of mine shared a poem with me that moved me from thought into action. And I'm going to share an excerpt with you from it now. It's by Drew Dellinger. And it says, "It's 3:23 in the morning and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what were you doing while the planet was plundered? What were you doing when the earth was unravelling? What did you do when you knew?" That last line haunts me. I now know that it's been the last 200 years, obviously, that carbon dioxide emissions have come into the atmosphere and been destroying the planet, but it's mostly been in the last 4.5 decades. That's my lifetime. I might not have always realised it, but my behaviours and my actions, my wallet, have definitely directly contributed to where we are today. And I also know that the bulk of those emissions historically come from the developed world, from the UK, from the EU, from the US, and the developing countries who have emitted the least are the ones who are really bearing the brunt of the crisis. This diagram, which we studied at Cambridge, really stopped me in my tracks. So as the youth activist Elizabeth Wathuti from Kenya rightly pointed out at COP26 2 weeks ago, Sub-Saharan Africans are responsible for about 0.5% of historical emissions, and the children are responsible for none. It is our responsibility as parents, as adults on this earth, to ensure that the children have food and water. At this point in time, I believe that 2 million Kenyans are facing climate-related starvation, and the figures are only predicted to rise globally as a result of the climate crisis. So this isn't some problem that's happening in the future. This is happening right now all around the world. And the other person who really struck home to me in that first week at COP was the president of Barbados, who said so eloquently in her opening speech to world leaders, a 2-degree world is a death sentence for many of the people in Pacific nations, for the people of Antigua, of Barbuda, of the Maldives, Dominica, Fiji, Kenya, Mozambique, Samoa, and Barbados. This is a crisis that is being counted out in the loss of lives and livelihoods, not just in loss of money. And the need to act is definitely urgent. The latest climate science from the IPCC report tells us that we have approximately 7 years and 8 months. That's about July in the year 2029 if we want to keep within a 1.5-degree world. That's the point at which our carbon budget runs out and irreversible climatic tipping points are reached. They're irreversible. We don't get to say after that point, oops, I made a mistake, can I go back and make a change now? This is why it's so important to act. We've only got one shot at it, it's our Earth shot, and it's really important that we move on it now. Sometimes parents on the school run or my friends when I'm out with them will say, it's really great that you're so passionate about climate change, Laura. And I'm thinking, I'm a mother. You know, my job is to try and keep my kids safe from harm, to try and enable them to lead a happy, contented life. I can't see another logical way forwards at this point. We're facing an existential threat. You know, surely it's on me, it's my responsibility as a parent to do everything I can possibly do to resolve the situation. I want to be able to look into my child's eyes in 10 years, in 20 years' time, and say to them, I did absolutely everything in my power. I want to be able to look into my child's eyes in 10 or 20 years' time and say, I did everything in my power to try and save the day. Can I have a glass of water? Thanks, guys. Sometimes it feels like we're climbing the biggest mountain climb of our lives, and I've sort of stuck my hand up as a Sherpa, and I don't really know how we're going to reach the summit. I just know that it's really important that I take a lead, and I'm hoping that if enough of us can work together quickly enough to overcome the obstacles, somehow we're going to get there on time. It feels like a real weight to carry, and if I stop to think about how I feel about my children's future, about any child's future long enough, it brings tears to my eyes. But the good news is, we have the science that will help us reverse the effects of climate change. We actually have all of the solutions that we need. We have all of the money that we need. It's just unevenly distributed. These are the two biggest innovation challenges of our time. And these are the things that I focus my work on: climate change and inequality. So this isn't a message of despair. It's definitely a call to action. It's our responsibility as parents, as adults on this earth, to do everything in our power to accelerate those solutions coming into being. So I'd like to share just 3 reflections that I've had as a parent, or frankly, as a human being on the planet right now, as to how we can move towards climate stability. This is Ash, that's Scarlett, by the way. So the first one is, don't waste anything. Don't waste electricity, don't waste paper, don't waste water. And as Sir David Attenborough constantly tells us, don't waste nature. And if you want to find a really simple way into that, a really good friend of mine asks this question, which is just think about, I'd love you to invite you to close your eyes actually, just think about what's the one place on earth you cherish. It might be somewhere you go on holiday, somewhere you retreat to when you're stressed, somewhere that's a really fond childhood memory, somewhere that you cherish. And then open your eyes and think about, in every decision you make every day, how can you protect that place? You don't need to get your arms around the whole world. Just think about how you can protect that one place. Secondly, understand and try and do something. At this point, ignorance is not an excuse. There are some brilliant documentaries out there. So David Attenborough and Johan Rockström's on the BBC and Netflix are a great start point because they're rooted in really, really reliable science. For this one, I'm going to give you one of my favourite questions from Clover from Force of Nature. What is the one problem that ignites a fire in your belly that you can do something about? I love this question, and I was thinking about it a couple of weeks ago while I was up at COP26. And I guess the businesswoman part of me was thinking, okay, so the one problem I'm going to solve is about small businesses. How can I help small businesses swarm together? Because they're facing a lot of roadblocks on their path to net zero at the moment. But if they can work collaboratively, if they can give each other a leg up, then we can accelerate where they can get to much, much more quickly while we wait for the infrastructure and the policy and the incentives to come in place. So that's kind of where I was playing as a businesswoman at COP26. So I know that for small businesses, business as usual is not going to work. I know that what we really need to do is rip up the old rule book and radically transform our mindset. What it's going to take over the next 7 years and 8 months is a level of collaboration and acceleration that the world has never seen. And that's got to happen across communities, across cities, across sectors, and across continents. This is a race that we either all win or we all lose. And we only win when the last person crosses the line. To try and encapsulate the power and potential for small businesses doing that, my colleagues and I at COP26 created an installation which we called Swarm of Hummingbirds, where we hung 500 origami hummingbirds, and each one had the logos of a different small business on it from around the world on a giant zero, just to spark the conversation around the scale and ambition of action that we think is required. And when I think about that question from Clover as a mother, the problem I choose to solve is to restore nature. So what I did on the first Monday of COP26 was I spent my life savings to plant 100,000 trees in a mangrove forest in Mozambique and Madagascar. And I did it as a radical act to show the scale of action that I believe is needed. But it was also to throw down the gauntlet to bigger businesses to say, hey, look, if a one-woman band can plant 100,000 trees, imagine what would happen if a major corporate really got ambitious. And it's working. It's already starting to have a ripple effect. I've heard from several bigger businesses who've reached out and said they're going to up the scale of their ambition around nature-based solutions. Hooray! That's what we wanted to happen. And that's awesome, right? So of course, that's what we wanted to happen. On the 6th day of COP26, because it was Nature Day, I then put a shout out to just my networks and said, hey, what if I make my forest a collective forest, right? What if we swarmed? What if anyone who wants to be part of my forest just jumped in and we try and plant 1 million trees as quickly as possible together? So crazily, these people answered my call in week 2 of COP26. I went from 100,000 trees to now just over 152,000 trees. They'll be planted over the next 12 months in places in the world that really need it. And, you know, another beautiful act of solidarity. Some of these people I know really, really well. That's my mum. Other people I've never met. I mean, I've spoken to them now, but we have a collective forest and people can start planting their own forest, but link into my parent forest so they get that sense of momentum that we're doing something big here. We're acting together. We're swarming together. So my third and final thought is about remembering to live your life. This is probably a bit of more of a dig in the ribs at myself than anyone else, but I find facing into climate change exhausting and absorbing most of the time. And so I have to remind myself to kind of hang up my climate boxing gloves and mess around with the kids, go run around in the forest with them still. And I call it kind of looking after the micro picture as well as looking after the big picture. We need to do both, but it's so important to not miss out on my children growing up and trying to fight to protect their future. So it's really, really important. So my final thought is to come back to the hummingbird, or the hummingbird mindset, as I like to call it. And it's this idea that we all feel tiny and insignificant at times. I know I do. But I genuinely believe if we can swarm together on taking action, we can move mountains. Thank you.